A wealthy man was searching for someone to care for his young son. He needed a woman with a good heart. Honest, someone who wouldn't come for the money but for genuine love toward children. After interviewing dozens of elegant and well-dressed candidates, all with impeccable references and calculated smiles, he decided to give a chance to a humble woman who arrived wearing her only clean skirt and worn but dignified shoes. She entered that immense mansion with white walls and marble floors that reflected light like mirrors for the first time, and when her eyes scanned the gold-framed photographs hanging in the main hallway, her face transformed completely. Tears poured out uncontrollably, her legs trembled until they could barely hold her, and from her throat came a choked scream as she pointed with trembling fingers toward one of the portraits, saying between heartbreaking sobs that face she had never forgotten. Before continuing with this story that will break your heart, leave me in the comments where you're listening to me from. From what country or city are you joining me right now? I'd love to know. It was March 23rd when it all began. The sky over the city had that leaden gray that forecasts rain but never quite falls, leaving the air heavy and difficult to breathe. The streets of the neighborhood where Victoria Hayes lived smelled of dampness and fried food, that aroma that sticks to clothes and doesn't come out even with the cheapest soap from the store. She lived on the third floor of a red brick building that had once been new but now showed cracks like scars on every wall. The elevator never worked. The stairs creaked with every step. Victoria was 42 years old, but looked 55. Life had not been generous with her. Her hands, rough and cracked from years of washing other people's clothes, told stories her mouth never spoke. Each wrinkle on her forehead was a lost battle, each premature gray hair a painful memory that refused to disappear. Her brown eyes, however, maintained a special light, a warmth that no tragedy had managed to extinguish completely. That morning she woke before dawn, as always. The cheap plastic alarm clock read 5:15 when her feet touched the cold floor of the one-room apartment she shared with her elderly mother. Mrs. Eleanor was still sleeping, her irregular and labored breathing filling the silence. She was 83 years old and had a lung disease that required expensive medicines. Medicines that Victoria couldn't always afford. She washed her face with cold water in the tiny bathroom sink. The mirror had been cracked for 3 years, since that terrible night she preferred not to remember. Her reflection appeared fragmented, split in two, like her own life. She pulled her dark hair back with an old elastic band and put on the only skirt she had that was halfway decent. A navy blue one she had bought used 5 years ago at the flea market. The white blouse had a small stain near the hem that she had tried to remove 1,000 times without success, but it was clean and carefully ironed. The black low-heeled shoes were worn at the soles. She could feel every imperfection of the pavement when she walked, but she had polished them the night before until they shone as much as $20 shoes with 15 years of use could shine. Mrs. Eleanor woke when Victoria was preparing tea on the electric burner that only worked in certain positions. The old woman looked at her with those eyes clouded by cataracts that also couldn't be operated on because the cost was impossible. "Honey," said Mrs. Eleanor's broken voice. "Honey, so early again. You shouldn't kill yourself working so hard." Victoria approached the narrow bed where her mother spent most of her time. She stroked her white hair, fine as silk threads. "Mom, I have an important interview today," Victoria responded, trying to sound optimistic. "It's to take care of a child, a family that lives in Riverside Heights. They say the pay is good." Riverside Heights, the neighborhood of the rich. The place where people lived who never had to count coins to buy bread. Where houses had gardens the size of entire parks and cars cost more than Victoria would earn in her entire lifetime. Mrs. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand with what little strength she had left. "Be careful, Misa. Those people aren't like us. Don't trust too much." Victoria nodded, although a part of her wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this opportunity would be different, that maybe she would find a family that would treat her with dignity, that would see in her something more than an employee, that would see a real woman with feelings and dreams, even though those dreams had shattered so long ago that she almost couldn't remember what it felt like to have hope. She left the apartment at 6:30 in the morning. The air was cold and damp. She took 2 buses to cross the city. The first was so full she had to stand squeezed between other tired bodies that smelled of sweat and resignation. The second was emptier. She sat by a dirty window and watched the urban landscape pass by, gradually changing from gray buildings and shops with peeling signs to wider streets, greener trees, larger and cleaner houses. When the bus reached the stop near Riverside Heights, Victoria got off with her heart beating hard in her chest. Her hands were sweating, despite the cold. She carried in her old imitation leather purse an envelope with her documents. Letter of recommendation from the previous family where she had worked as a domestic employee for 8 years until they moved to another country. High school diploma. Passport-sized photo where she looked 10 years younger. She walked along perfectly paved streets where there wasn't a single pothole. The sidewalks were clean, the trees trimmed with precision, houses hidden behind high walls and electric gates. Everything smelled different here. Of flowers, of freshly cut grass, of money. The address she had been given corresponded to a 3-story mansion at the end of a private street. The perimeter wall was white stone and must have been at least 13 feet high. The wrought iron gates had elegant designs of leaves and flowers. Through them you could see an immense garden with water fountains and marble sculptures. Victoria stopped in front of the intercom. Her finger trembled before pressing the button. She heard a soft chime followed by a male voice through the speaker. "Yes?" "Good morning," Victoria said with an uncertain voice. "I'm Victoria Hayes. I'm here for the interview, for the nanny position." There was silence. Then an electric buzz and the gate began to open slowly inward. Victoria swallowed and entered, walking along a path of perfectly aligned stones that crossed the garden. She had never seen so much beauty concentrated in one place. Rose bushes of all colors, enormous hydrangeas, white lilies that looked like porcelain. The grass was so green and perfect it was scary to step on it. The main door of the mansion was dark wood carved with intricate designs. Before Victoria could knock, the door opened and a tall man appeared dressed in an impeccable gray suit. He must have been close to 60 years old. Completely white hair combed back, cold blue eyes like ice, serious face with no trace of a smile. "Mrs. Hayes," he said with a deep and modulated voice. "I'm Richard Caldwell. Please come in." Victoria entered and immediately felt she was entering another world. The hallway was bigger than her entire apartment. The white marble floor with gray veins shone so much she could see her blurred reflection. A spiral staircase with a golden railing went up to the upper floors. The ceiling must have been 20 feet high. From it hung a crystal chandelier with hundreds of pieces that reflected light, creating small rainbows on the walls. But what captured Victoria's attention were the photographs. Dozens of portraits framed in gold frames hung on the white walls. Family photographs. A young and handsome man with a small child in his arms. The same man years later with the child bigger. Photographs of trips, of celebrations, of happy moments captured and preserved like treasures. Victoria walked slowly following Richard Caldwell, but her eyes couldn't stop looking at the photographs. There was something in those faces, something familiar that she couldn't place, but that gave her a strange feeling in her stomach. "Wait here, please," said the butler, pointing to a side room. "Mr. Sterling will be down in a moment." Sterling, that last name gave her a chill. She didn't know why. Maybe she had heard it somewhere before. Maybe it was just her imagination playing tricks. The waiting room was elegant but cold. White leather sofas, glass coffee table, abstract paintings on the walls. Victoria sat on the edge of the sofa, as if afraid to dirty it. Her hands wouldn't stop playing with the zipper of her purse. 10 minutes passed that seemed like hours. Then she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Firm, confident steps from someone accustomed to the world moving according to his will. A man who must have been around 45 entered the room. Tall, athletic build, dressed in black dress pants and light blue shirt rolled up to his elbows. Dark hair with some gray at the temples. Face with marked features. Square jaw, pronounced cheekbones. Intense green eyes that seemed to pierce through her when they looked at her. Victoria stood immediately. She felt her knees weak. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Sebastian Sterling. Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm but not aggressive. His voice deep but not intimidating. There was something in his gaze that contrasted with the coldness of the mansion, a sadness hidden behind that facade of successful and powerful man. Please sit down, he said, pointing to the sofa. Victoria obeyed. Sebastian sat across from her on another sofa, leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees and interlaced his fingers. I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Hayes, he began saying, looking directly into her eyes. I've interviewed 23 women in the last 2 weeks, all with excellent references, all with experience, some with studies in child education or psychology, certificates, diplomas, impressive resumes. He paused. Victoria felt her opportunity vanishing before it started. She didn't have any of that. She only had years of experience caring for other people's children with love, while crying silently for the son she had lost. But none of them convinced me, Sebastian continued. They all talked a lot, smiled too much, said the right words. But I didn't feel anything real in them. I only saw women looking for a good salary. And understand me, I don't blame them. We all work for money. But my son doesn't need someone who's here just for money. Victoria didn't know what to answer. She just looked at him, waiting for him to continue. My son's name is Daniel, Sebastian said, and his voice softened barely perceptibly when pronouncing that name. He's 7 years old. He's an intelligent, sensitive, introverted child. He lost his mother when he was 3, cancer. It was fast, brutal. She was gone in 4 months from diagnosis to the end. Sebastian's voice broke slightly on the last sentence. Although he tried to hide it, Victoria felt a pang in her chest. She knew what pain was. She knew it intimately. Since then, he continued after clearing his throat, Daniel has been emotionally closed off. He sees a child psychologist twice a week. He's improving, but it's a slow process. I've hired 5 nannies in these 4 years. Some quit because they didn't know how to handle his silences. Others I had to fire because they treated him like he was a problem child, when what he really needs is patience and genuine love. Sebastian leaned back on the sofa and sighed. I work many hours. I travel frequently for business. I need someone who doesn't just take care of Daniel. I need someone who gives him what I can't give him when I'm not here. Presence, warmth. Someone who really sees him and doesn't just watch him. Victoria finally found her voice, although it sounded shaky. Mr. Sterling, she said slowly, I don't have fancy certificates. I didn't study pedagogy or anything like that. I barely finished high school. I've worked my whole life, cleaning houses, washing clothes, taking care of children. But I can tell you something with complete honesty. I know what pain is. I know what it's like to lose someone you love more than your own life. And I know that children don't need pretty words. They need arms that truly hug them. They need someone to see them with eyes that understand what they feel without having to explain it. Sebastian looked at her with an intensity that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. Do you have children, Mrs. Hayes? The question fell like a stone in calm water. Victoria felt the air escape from her lungs, her eyes filled with tears that she struggled to contain. She clenched her fists on her skirt. I had a son, she answered with barely audible voice. I had him, but they took him from me. He was just a baby. They took him from you? It's a long and painful story, Victoria said, and a tear escaped rolling down her cheek despite her efforts. But yes, I know what it is to love a child with everything you are. I know what it's like to have your heart broken. That's why I can understand your son's pain, because I also carry that pain every day. The silence that followed was dense and charged with unspoken emotions. Sebastian looked at her differently now, as if he really saw her for the first time. Not as another candidate, not as a potential employee, but as a person with history, with wounds, with humanity. Finally, he spoke. The job is Monday through Friday from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. Weekends off, unless I have to travel for an emergency. You'll have your own room here in the house. Food included. Health insurance. The salary is $2,500 a month. Victoria couldn't help her eyes widening with surprise. $2,500. She had never earned more than $400 in her best month. With that money, she could pay for her mother's medicines. She could fix the roof leaks. She could eat something more than rice and beans. When can I start? She asked, trying to maintain her composure. Tomorrow, if that works for you, Sebastian responded, standing up. But first, let me introduce you to Daniel. If he feels comfortable with you, then we have a deal. If not, I'll keep looking. After all, he's the one who will spend the most time with you. They left the room, and Sebastian guided her toward the staircase. They went up to the second floor. The hallway was long with doors on both sides. The walls here were also full of photographs. Victoria couldn't help looking at them as they walked. And then she saw it. Among all the photographs, there was one larger than the rest. It was in an especially elaborate gold frame. It was the photograph of a woman, a young and beautiful woman with long blonde hair, clear eyes that smiled along with her mouth, dressed in an elegant white suit. In her arms she held a tiny baby wrapped in a light blue blanket. But it wasn't the woman that made Victoria stop dead in her tracks. It was the baby. It was the light blue blanket. It was the way the woman held that baby. It was the gold watch visible on the woman's wrist. It was the small birthmark that could be distinguished on the baby's neck. Everything happened in slow motion. The world tilted, the walls closed in, the air became thick like water. Victoria felt her legs stop supporting her. Her vision blurred. Her heart began to beat so hard it thundered in her ears, drowning out all other sounds. "It can't be," she whispered with strangled voice. "It can't be." She took a step toward the photograph with hands trembling uncontrollably. Tears began to fall without her being able to stop them. A sob escaped from her throat, and then another and another, until she was crying with a devastating force that made her bend over herself. "That's my son," she screamed, pointing at the photograph with trembling fingers. "That's my son. That's my baby. That mark on his neck. I know it. I kissed it every day. That's my boy." Sebastian had frozen behind her. His face showed a mixture of confusion and alarm. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, trying to stay calm, "I think you're confused. That's my wife Lauren, with our son Daniel. The photograph was taken at the hospital the day he was born." "No," Victoria screamed, turning to look at him with eyes reddened and swollen from tears. "No, no. They took my baby from me. They told me he had died. They told me he was stillborn. But I heard him cry. I heard his cry before they put me to sleep. When I woke up, they told me he had died, and they wouldn't let me see him. They wouldn't let me say goodbye. They stole him from me." Her voice broke completely on the last word. She fell to her knees on the marble floor, not caring about anything else. The pain of 24 years repressed came out of her like a river breaking a dam. She cried with her whole body, with every cell, with every gasping breath. Sebastian didn't know what to do. This situation exceeded any scenario he had imagined. He knelt in front of her, keeping a prudent distance. "Mrs. Hayes," he said with a softer voice now, "I need you to take a deep breath and listen to me. I understand you're suffering, but there must be a mistake. My wife gave birth to Daniel at St. Raphael Private Hospital on August 15th. I was present. I saw the whole process. She held our baby." "August 15th," Victoria repeated between sobs. "August 15th. My God, my baby was born on August 15th at St. Raphael Hospital. They took me there in an emergency. I was poor. I had no money. They treated me in the charity area. I was alone, so alone." Sebastian felt something icy run down his spine. It couldn't be a coincidence, but it also couldn't be true what this woman was insinuating. It was impossible. Absurd. Lauren had been pregnant. He had seen her belly grow. He had gone to all the medical appointments with her. He had seen the ultrasounds. He had been in the delivery room. Although now that he thought about it, Lauren wasn't allowed to have a natural birth. They did an emergency C-section. He didn't see the birth directly. They made him wait outside. When they finally let him in, Lauren was sedated and the baby, already cleaned and wrapped, was in a crib next to her. No, he told himself. He was being ridiculous. This woman's pain was confusing her. The trauma was making her see things that weren't real. Babies were born in that hospital every day. That it had been the same date was simply a painful coincidence. But the birthmark. Daniel did indeed have a small birthmark on the right side of his neck, barely visible, like a tiny crescent moon. Mrs. Hayes, Sebastian said, with firm voice trying to regain control of the situation, I understand this is very emotional for you, but I think your pain is making you confuse things. Thousands of babies are born every day. Coincidences happen. It's not a coincidence. Victoria sobbed, wiping her face with her hands. I know what I saw. I know what I feel. That's the blanket I managed to see when they snatched him from me. That watch on that woman's wrist. I saw it at the hospital. I saw a blonde woman with that watch talking to the doctors. I thought she was another patient, but then everything became confusing. She stood up with difficulty, holding on to the wall to keep from falling. She looked at the photograph again with pleading eyes, as if the image could confirm what her heart was screaming. Please, she whispered, please let me see your son. Let me look at him. I'll know. A mother always knows. Sebastian was debating internally. Part of him wanted to call security and end this uncomfortable situation. But another part, a deeper part he didn't understand, felt there was something important happening, something he couldn't simply ignore. Finally he nodded. All right, I'll take you to Daniel, but I warn you that if you scare him or disturb him, I'll have to ask you to leave. They walked in silence down the hallway to a door at the end decorated with a plaque that said Daniel in painted wooden letters and colors. Sebastian knocked gently. Daniel, it's Dad. Can I come in? A child's voice answered from inside. Yes. They entered a large and bright room. The walls were painted light blue. There were shelves full of books and toys, a bed shaped like a race car, a small desk where a boy was sitting drawing. Daniel looked up when they entered. He was a beautiful child, dark brown wavy hair, green eyes like his father's but with a different shape, more almond-shaped, more similar to. Victoria felt her heart stop. Dear God. It was like looking at herself in a mirror from the past. Daniel had her same eyes, the same nose shape, the same jawline that she had inherited from her father. Even the way he tilted his head when he was concentrating. Daniel, Sebastian said, this is Mrs. Victoria. She came to meet you. Maybe she'll work here taking care of you. The boy looked at Victoria with that serious and penetrating look that children who have lived pain too soon have. He didn't smile. Didn't say hello, just observed her with cautious curiosity. Victoria approached slowly. Each step cost her a superhuman effort because she felt her legs were like jelly. She knelt in front of the desk to be at the boy's height. Hello, Daniel, she said with trembling voice, trying to smile despite the tears that still moistened her cheeks. What a nice drawing you're making. Daniel looked at his drawing. It was a landscape with mountains and a river. I like to draw, he said with soft and shy voice. I also liked to draw when I was a girl, Victoria responded. I was never very good, but I liked it. There was an awkward silence. Sebastian observed the scene with arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe. His expression was unreadable. Then Daniel did something unexpected. He moved a little closer to Victoria and looked directly into her eyes for several seconds. Your eyes are like mine, he said with that brutal sincerity that only children have. Victoria felt like she was drowning. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. And you smell good, Daniel continued. You smell like the bread my grandmother used to make before she died. That simple, childish statement broke something inside Victoria. More tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time she tried to smile. Thank you, my boy, she whispered. Thank you for saying that. Why are you crying? Daniel asked, with genuine curiosity without fear. Because sometimes grown-ups cry when we're happy and sad at the same time, Victoria answered with all the honesty she could gather. I do that too, Daniel said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Sometimes I dream about my mom, and when I wake up, I'm happy because I saw her, but sad because she's not here anymore. Oh, my love, Victoria whispered. Unable to contain herself, and without thinking about the consequences, she extended her arms. To everyone's surprise, especially Sebastian's, Daniel approached and let Victoria hug him. It was a soft, trembling hug, charged with 24 years of repressed love and unhealed pain. Sebastian felt a lump in his throat, seeing the scene. Daniel never approached strangers like that. Never. With previous nannies, he had always maintained a cold and polite distance. But with this woman in worn clothes and sad eyes, there was something different, an inexplicable connection. After a minute, Victoria released the boy. She wiped her tears, trying to regain composure. "You're a very special boy, Daniel," she told him. "Very special." Daniel returned to his drawing as if nothing had happened, but Victoria noticed there was a tiny smile on his lips. Almost imperceptible, but it was there. Sebastian signaled for her to leave the room. Once in the hallway with the door closed, he looked at her with an expression that mixed confusion, concern, and something else he couldn't identify. "I don't know what just happened in there," he said with low voice, "but Daniel never behaves like that with anyone, not even with his paternal grandmother who comes to visit him every 2 weeks. There's something in you that he felt." "It's because I'm his mother," Victoria said with absolute conviction in her voice. "I know it sounds impossible. I know you think I'm crazy. But that boy came from my body. I carried him inside me for 9 months. I felt every kick, every movement, and when they took him from me, they ripped out my soul. I've lived 24 years with an emptiness that nothing could fill. Until now, until I saw that photograph, and I knew. I simply knew." Sebastian ran his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration and exhaustion. "Mrs. Hayes, this is a very serious accusation. You're insinuating that my wife and I stole a baby, that my son is not my son. You're saying there was some kind of baby trafficking in one of the most prestigious hospitals in the city. Do you realize what you're saying?" "I know," Victoria responded with firm voice. "I know perfectly what I'm saying, and I'm not accusing you. You are also a victim, but your wife. That woman in the photograph. I saw her at the hospital. I saw her talking to doctors. I saw her in the hallways. Something happened there. Something terrible." Sebastian felt the floor moving under his feet. All this was too much. It was absurd. But at the same time, there were details he couldn't ignore. Daniel's eyes. The shape of his nose. The birthmark. The exact date. The same hospital. The child's immediate reaction to this woman. And there was something else, something Sebastian had never told anyone, a secret he had kept for years because thinking about it filled him with unbearable guilt. When Daniel was 2 years old, they did blood tests for an infection. The results showed a blood type that didn't exactly match what was expected, given Sebastian and Lauren's blood types. The doctor said it sometimes happened, that there were complex genetic variations. Sebastian let it go because Lauren got very upset when he asked if they were sure of the results. She accused him of doubting her fidelity, and Sebastian never mentioned the topic again. But it always remained there, that small doubt buried in the deepest part of his mind. "Listen, Mrs. Hayes," he finally said, "I need time to process all this. I can't simply believe your word without any proof." "Then do tests," Victoria responded with determination. "Do a DNA test. Verify yourself if I'm telling the truth or if I'm crazy." Sebastian looked at her for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we'll do the test. But this stays between us until we have the results. I don't want Daniel to find out about anything. He's in a delicate moment of his psychological treatment, and I won't allow anyone to confuse him more." "I understand," Victoria said. "I only ask one thing. Let me work here while we wait for the results. Let me be close to him. If in the end the test says I'm wrong, I'll leave without causing problems. But if I'm right, if that boy is my son, I want to have been close to him all this time." Sebastian rubbed his face with his hands. He was emotionally and mentally exhausted, but something inside him told him to give this woman a chance. Something he couldn't explain rationally. "Agreed," he finally said. "Start tomorrow. But I warn you, if at any point I see that your presence negatively affects Daniel, we'll end this immediately. DNA test or not." Victoria felt a relief so great she almost fainted. She nodded repeatedly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. You won't regret it." Sebastian called Richard to accompany Victoria to see the room that would be hers and to give her all the details about schedules and Daniel's routines. As he watched her walk away down the hallway following the butler, he felt his ordered and controlled life had just taken a turn toward completely unknown territory. That night, Sebastian couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his king-size bed, feeling small and lost. His mind replayed over and over Victoria's words, her desperation, her pain, the way Daniel had reacted with her. He got up at 3 in the morning and went to the study. He took from a locked drawer a metal box where he kept important documents. Among them was Daniel's original birth certificate. He read it over and over as if it were the first time. St. Raphael Private Hospital, August 15th. Son of Sebastian Sterling and Lauren Valdez Sterling. Everything seemed to be in order. But then he remembered something he hadn't thought about in years. When Lauren was 7 months pregnant, she fell down the stairs of their previous house. They took her to the hospital in an emergency. The doctors said the baby was fine, but that Lauren had to keep absolute bed rest. From that day until the birth 2 months later, Lauren barely left the house. And when the time came for delivery, everything was so chaotic. Lauren had high blood pressure. There was bleeding. They did an emergency C-section. Sebastian was made to wait in another room. And then there was the nurse. There was a nurse with pulled-back black hair and big glasses. Sebastian had seen her several times during those hours of waiting. She went in and out of the delivery room. Once she looked at him in a strange way, as if she wanted to tell him something but didn't dare. Sebastian at that moment was so worried about Lauren that he didn't give it importance. But now that memory took on a new meaning. He poured himself a whiskey neat, although he normally didn't drink during the week. He needed it. He looked out the window of his study toward the dark garden, illuminated only by the automatic lights of the path. If Victoria was right, if for some twisted and sick reason someone had switched babies that day, if Daniel wasn't biologically his son, no, he couldn't allow himself to think that way. Daniel was his son. He had raised him. He loved him. He had been there for every important moment of his life, for his first words, his first steps, his nightmares, his joys. Blood ties weren't the only thing that made a family. But if Victoria was Daniel's biological mother, then she had spent 24 years with empty arms, believing her baby was dead, carrying that pain, and unknowingly Sebastian had been raising that stolen son. Guilt overwhelmed him. Although rationally he knew he had done nothing wrong. If this was true, he was also a victim. But then Lauren, his wife, the woman he had loved, Daniel's mother in all practical senses. If this was true, it meant Lauren had been involved in something horrible, that she had lied, that she had participated in something unforgivable. No, it couldn't be. Lauren had been a good woman, generous, loving, a little spoiled because she came from a rich family, a little materialistic, but not a criminal, not a baby kidnapper. Although there were moments during her pregnancy when Lauren acted strangely, mood swings that doctors attributed to hormones, but that seemed deeper, mysterious outings that she justified, saying she was going to prenatal massages or yoga classes. Phone calls she cut off abruptly when Sebastian entered the room. And then there was the money. Large sums of money that disappeared from her personal accounts shortly before Daniel's birth. Lauren said she had invested in a friend's business that turned out to be a scam. Sebastian didn't investigate further because he trusted her. Now all those small incongruous details were beginning to form a pattern that turned his stomach. The next morning he called his personal attorney, a discreet man who had handled delicate matters for him in the past. "Michael, I need you to investigate something for me," Sebastian said without preliminary greetings. "I need you to review the records of St. Raphael Hospital from August 15th, specifically everything related to the births that day. Names of doctors, nurses, any reported irregularities. And I need you to do it without raising suspicions." Michael was professional enough not to ask questions. "Understood. I'll have something for you in 3 days. And one more thing," Sebastian added. "I need you to arrange discreetly a paternity test, one that's completely private and legal." "Very well. With whom?" "With a woman named Victoria Hayes, and with my son, Daniel." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sebastian," Michael said with cautious voice, "whatever is happening, be careful. Paternity tests can open doors that can't be closed again." "I know," Sebastian responded. That's exactly why I need to do it. That same afternoon, Victoria arrived at the mansion with a small suitcase where she carried her scarce clothing. Richard received her and took her to the room that would be hers. It was on the first floor in a separate wing from the main bedrooms. It was simple but comfortable. Queen-size bed, built-in closet, private bathroom, window with a view of the side garden. It was the most luxurious place Victoria had slept in her life. She sat on the bed and for the first time in 24 years allowed a small spark of hope to light in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, God had finally heard all those desperate prayers she had whispered on dark nights. At 6 in the evening, she gently knocked on Daniel's bedroom door as she had been instructed. The boy was reading a book lying on his bed. "Hello, Daniel," Victoria said with a genuine smile. "Your dad asked me to help you with dinner and to be with you for a while. Is that okay with you?" Daniel looked at her with those green eyes so similar to hers and nodded. "What are you reading?" Victoria asked, approaching. "It's a book about dinosaurs," he responded, showing her the illustrations. "This is my favorite. It's called Triceratops." Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "Tell me about it," she said with genuine interest. And Daniel did. He talked for 15 minutes about dinosaurs with more enthusiasm than Sebastian had seen him show for anything in months. Victoria listened to every word as if it were the most important thing in the world. She asked details. She was surprised at the right moments. She laughed when he made dinosaur sounds. Sebastian watched them from the door without them noticing. There was something in the way Victoria looked at Daniel, a tenderness so deep and authentic that reminded him of the way his own mother had looked at him when he was a child, before she died of a heart attack when he was 15. After dinner, which the three of them ate together in a mostly comfortable silence, Sebastian asked Victoria to accompany him to the study. "Tomorrow we'll go to a private laboratory," he told her. "We'll both give samples for the DNA test. The results will take approximately 5 business days." Victoria nodded. Her heart was beating hard, but her expression was of calm determination. "All right, I'm ready." Meanwhile, Sebastian said, leaning back in his leather chair behind the mahogany desk, "I need you to tell me your complete story. Everything you remember about that day at the hospital. Names, faces. Any detail could be important." Victoria sat in front of him. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "It was summer, August. I had just turned 18. I was so young and so foolish. I had fallen in love with a boy from the neighborhood. His name was Robert. He was 3 years older than me. Handsome, easy smile. He said nice things to me. He made me feel special. My parents didn't approve. They said he was a bum, that he just wanted to take advantage of me. But I didn't listen. I thought it was true love." Her voice broke slightly but continued. "I got pregnant. When I told him, Robert disappeared. I never saw him again. My parents got very angry. My mom cried for days. My dad wouldn't even talk to me. But in the end, they supported me. They had no money, but they supported me." She wiped away a tear rolling down her cheek. "The pregnancy was difficult. I worked cleaning houses until the 8th month because we needed the money. One day I started bleeding a lot. My mom took me to St. Raphael Hospital in an emergency because it was the closest. They treated me in the charity area. The doctors said it was placental abruption, that they had to get the baby out now." She closed her eyes as if reliving that moment was physically painful. "They took me to a room. Everything was cold. The lights were so bright they hurt my eyes. There were doctors and nurses with masks. I couldn't see their full faces, only their eyes. They put something in my IV. They told me to calm down, that everything was going to be fine. But I was afraid, so afraid." Her breathing quickened. "I remember I felt, when the baby came out, I felt that sudden emptiness. And then I heard a cry, a loud and clear cry. My baby was crying. He was alive. I tried to get up. I wanted to see him. I wanted to hold him, but the nurses pushed me down. They told me to stay still. One of them injected something else into my IV. Everything became blurry. Before losing consciousness, I saw a blonde woman entering the room. She wore a big gold watch on her left wrist. I remember her because I thought it was strange that a patient was dressed so elegantly. She wore a cream-colored dress, long hair perfectly styled, impeccable makeup. She looked directly into my eyes for a second, and then everything went black. She took a long pause. Sebastian said nothing, waiting for her to continue. When I woke up, I was in a shared room with three other women. My mom was sitting next to my bed, crying. I asked her about my baby. She just shook her head. A doctor came, an older man with thick glasses. He told me he was sorry to inform me that my baby had been born lifeless, that they had done everything possible but the detachment had been too severe and the baby hadn't received enough oxygen. He told me it was better that way, that at my age I would have other children as if a baby was interchangeable. Anger now appeared in her voice mixed with pain. I told him I had heard my baby cry, that I was sure. The doctor told me that sometimes mothers in shock hear things that aren't real, that it was a defense mechanism of the mind. I begged him to let me see my baby, that I wanted to see him even if he was dead. I wanted to say goodbye. The doctor said it wasn't advisable, that it would only cause me more trauma, that they had already taken care of the body. My mom begged me not to insist, to let my little angel rest. More tears were falling now uncontrollably. I left the hospital 2 days later with empty arms and a broken heart. For weeks I couldn't stop crying. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I repeated over and over that I had heard him cry, that my baby was alive. My mom thought I was going crazy from pain. She took me to a priest. She took me to a psychologist who charged cheap. Everyone told me the same thing, that I had to accept the loss, that God had his reasons, that I was young and would have more opportunities. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Eventually, I stopped talking about it because I saw how much it hurt my parents. I pretended I had gotten over it. But I never got over it. Every August 15th was a day of mourning for me. Every time I saw a child the age my son would be, I wondered what he would be like. If he would have my nose, my eyes, if he would like the same things as me. She looked directly at Sebastian with an intensity that made him shudder. My dad died 12 years ago from a heart attack. My mom is sick with her lungs. I never married, never had a serious relationship again. How could I when a part of me was always dead? I work at whatever I can. I take care of other people's children. I clean houses. I wash clothes. And every day I live with this emptiness that never fills. The silence after her account was heavy and painful. Sebastian had reclined in his chair with closed eyes, processing every word. The blonde woman you describe, he finally said with hoarse voice, sounds like my wife Lauren, the gold watch. She had one like that. It was an inheritance from her grandmother. She wore it always. And that day, as I understand it, she was also at the hospital supposedly to give birth. Supposedly, Victoria repeated, catching the key word. Sebastian opened his eyes and looked at her. I was with Lauren during her pregnancy. I saw her belly grow, but now that I think about it, now that I review my memories with this new information, there were strange things. Lauren didn't want me to touch her much. She said she was very sensitive. She always wore very loose clothing, even when other pregnant women can't hide their bellies anymore. And just before delivery, she was very nervous. Different, as if something was tormenting her. He stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to Victoria. If what you're saying is true, if my wife participated in switching babies, in stealing your son and passing him off as hers, then everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved was a lie, and I don't know if I can live with that. Mr. Sterling, Victoria said with soft voice, I don't want to destroy your memories of your wife. I don't want to take Daniel from you. I just want the truth. And if the truth is that Daniel is my son, I'm not going to rip him from the only life he knows. He loves you. You're his dad in all the important senses. But I just want to be able to be in his life somehow, to be able to love him, to finally fill this emptiness that has been slowly killing me for 24 years. Sebastian turned to look at her. For the first time since all this began, he saw Victoria not as a threat or as an unstable woman, but as what she really was, a shattered mother searching for her lost son. Let's wait for the test results, he said with tired voice, and then we'll decide what to do. The next 5 days were the longest in Victoria's life. Every morning she woke up in the mansion's room, unable to believe all this was real. She fulfilled her duties, caring for Daniel with a dedication that went far beyond professional. Every moment with him was a treasure she kept in her heart. Daniel, for his part, seemed to flourish with her presence. He talked more, he smiled more frequently. Even his psychologist commented on the notable improvement in his mood. One afternoon, while they were making cookies together in the mansion's enormous kitchen, Daniel asked her something that made Victoria's heart stop. "Victoria," the boy said with flour on his hands, "why do you sometimes look at me like you're sad and happy at the same time?" Victoria stopped mixing the dough. She looked at those familiar green eyes. "Because you're a very special boy, Daniel," she responded with honesty. "And being with you makes me feel very strong things that I don't know how to explain. Like when I dream about my mom," he asked with that childish intuition that's sometimes sharper than all adult intelligence. "Yes," Victoria whispered. "Exactly like that." Daniel wiped his hands on the apron Victoria had put on him. He approached her and without saying anything hugged her around the waist, resting his head against her stomach. "I like you, Victoria," he said with voice muffled by the fabric of her clothes. "I hope you stay here a long time." Victoria felt tears threatening to come out, but she held them back. She stroked Daniel's curly hair with infinite tenderness. "I hope to stay too, my love," she whispered. Sebastian saw them from the kitchen entrance. He had come home early from work, specifically to observe them. What he saw confirmed what he already knew in his heart. Whether or not there was biological connection, there was something undeniable between Victoria and Daniel, something pure and real. That night, when Daniel was already sleeping, Sebastian poured himself a whiskey and sat on the terrace overlooking the back garden. The night air was cool. The stars shone brighter than usual. He heard soft footsteps behind him, and knew without turning that it was Victoria. "I couldn't sleep," she said, by way of explanation. "Me neither," Sebastian responded, pointing to the chair next to him. "Sit if you want." They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Sebastian spoke. "Tomorrow we'll have the results," he said, looking at his glass. "Part of me hopes they're negative, that all this has been a terrible confusion, and we can move on with our lives. But another part hopes they're positive, because that would mean Daniel found his true mother, and despite the chaos that will cause, I think you deserve that. You deserve to recover what was stolen from you." Victoria felt a lump in her throat. "You're a good man, Mr. Sterling," she said with trembling voice. "Your son is fortunate to have you, regardless of where his blood comes from." "Call me Sebastian," he said finally, looking at her. "I think we've shared enough to leave formalities behind." "All right, Sebastian." They talked for 2 hours that night. Sebastian told her about Lauren, about how they met at a charity gala when he was 30 and she was 25, about how she was charming and sophisticated, about how he fell in love with her laugh and the way she made him feel important, about the marriage that was happy the first years until Lauren began to obsess over having a child. "We were trying for 3 years," Sebastian told. "Lauren visited every specialist. We did fertility treatments. Nothing worked. She fell into a deep depression. She stopped going out. She stopped getting ready. She cried for hours. And then suddenly, 8 years ago, she announced she was pregnant. She said it was a miracle. The doctors were surprised. I was ecstatic. Finally, we were going to have the baby she wanted so much." He took a long pause, taking a sip of his drink. "Now I wonder if she was really pregnant, or if it was all an elaborate lie to hide what she really planned to do." Victoria listened without interrupting. She could see the pain in every line of his face. This man was also a victim. He had also been lied to. He had also had something stolen. They had stolen the truth from him. "I told you about my life," Victoria said, "about poverty, about working since I was a child, about never having enough, about dreaming of simple things that for others are normal, a roof that doesn't leak, 3 meals a day, being able to buy medicine when someone gets sick." She described how, after losing her baby, she had fallen into a darkness from which it took her years to half emerge, how she developed anxiety attacks when she saw pregnant women, How every time she held someone else's baby, she felt joy and pain mixed until it physically hurt. But I kept going, she said with firmer voice, because my mom needed me, and because something inside me refused to give up completely, as if a part of me knew my baby was somewhere, that he hadn't died, that someday I would find him. Sebastian looked at her with genuine respect. You're a very strong woman, Victoria. I had no other choice, she responded with a sad smile. Life doesn't ask you if you're strong enough. It just hits you and you decide whether to get up or stay on the ground. The next morning, Sebastian received a call from his attorney. Sebastian, Michael said with serious voice, I have the results. You need to come to my office. Tell me now. This isn't something you say over the phone. Michael, tell me. There was a heavy silence. Then, the DNA test is positive. Victoria Hayes is Daniel's biological mother, and you're not the biological father. Sebastian felt like he'd been hit in the stomach with a hammer. Although a part of him expected it, hearing it confirmed was something completely different. Are you sure? He managed to say with choked voice. 100% sure. The tests were done 3 times to confirm. There's no doubt. Also, I did the investigation you asked for about the hospital. I found things, Sebastian, very serious things. You need to come now. Sebastian hung up and sat on his bed, unable to move. Daniel wasn't his biological son. Everything had been a lie. Lauren had lied. She had participated in stealing a baby. His son, the boy he had raised and loved for 7 years, had been ripped from his true mother's arms minutes after being born. He felt nauseous. He ran to the bathroom and vomited everything he had for breakfast. He washed his face with cold water but couldn't stop shaking. His entire life had been built on a lie, on a horrible crime. He gently knocked on Victoria's door. When she opened and saw his face, she knew immediately. It's positive, isn't it? She whispered, with tears already rolling down her cheeks. Sebastian nodded, unable to speak. Victoria covered her mouth with both hands, choking a sob. She fell to her knees on the floor. Sebastian knelt in front of her, and for the second time since all this began, he hugged her. They both cried. He for the betrayal, she for the confirmation that her nightmare had been real. My baby, Victoria cried, clinging to Sebastian. My baby is alive. He's here. I got him back. My God, I got him back. Sebastian held her while she fell apart in his arms, releasing 24 years of contained pain. He cried with her because although Daniel wasn't his biological son, he loved him as if he were. And that made everything even more complicated and painful. When they could finally calm down a bit, Sebastian told her about his appointment with Michael. Victoria wanted to go with him, but he asked her to stay with Daniel. He didn't want the boy to notice something was wrong. At Michael's office, Sebastian found not only the attorney, but also another woman, a private investigator that Michael had hired. Sebastian, Michael said with somber expression, let me introduce you to Carolina Mendez. She specializes in child trafficking cases. I asked her to investigate what happened at St. Raphael Hospital that day 7 years ago. Carolina was a woman of about 50, with sharp and intelligent gaze. She opened a folder full of documents. Mr. Sterling, she began, saying, what I'm going to tell you is serious. There's evidence that St. Raphael Hospital was involved in a baby trafficking network that operated between 10 and 5 years ago. They got babies from poor mothers who arrived alone and in vulnerable situations. They told them their babies had been stillborn. Meanwhile, they delivered those babies to rich couples who were willing to pay large sums of money and ask minimal questions. Sebastian felt dizzy. The operation was led by Dr. Ernest Salazar, Carolina continued. He was the director of the maternity area at that time. He worked with several nurses. They had a system. They identified target mothers, young women, poor, without close family, or with families that wouldn't ask many questions. During delivery, they heavily sedated them. Then they falsified death certificates for the babies. They disposed of bodies of babies who had actually been stillborn to have documentation if someone asked. And they sold the live babies to waiting couples. How is it possible no one noticed? Sebastian asked, with voice trembling with rage. They did it sporadically, Carolina responded. Not every day, maybe 3 or 4 cases a year. Spaced out enough not to raise suspicions. And the victims were always people without resources or influence. Who was going to listen to a poor girl saying her dead baby was actually alive? And Lauren Sebastian asked, although he already knew the answer, she was involved. Carolina pulled out more documents. I have bank records showing your wife paid $2 million 3 months before Daniel's supposed birth. The money went to an offshore account linked to Dr. Salazar. I also have testimony from a nurse who worked there. She's willing to testify that your wife arrived at the hospital on August 15th dressed in maternity clothes and special makeup to look like she had just given birth. She entered through a back entrance. They took her to a private room. They gave her Victoria Hayes's baby. They posed for photographs in that room, and then she left through the main door with the baby presenting him as her newborn son. Sebastian sank into his chair. He felt like he couldn't breathe. Dr. Salazar, he asked, with barely audible voice, where is he now? He died 3 years ago, Michael responded. Massive heart attack. Very convenient for everyone involved. And the other people in the network. Some are in prison for other crimes. Some disappeared. Some are still working in the medical system without anyone knowing what they did. Can we prove all this? Sebastian asked. We have enough evidence to reopen the case, Carolina said. Testimonies, financial documents, the DNA test. But I need to ask you something, Mr. Sterling. Do you want this to become public? Because if we move forward, this will be in all the newspapers. Your wife's name will be dragged through the mud. Daniel's name will be in the headlines. Your private life will become a media circus. Sebastian closed his eyes. Every option was horrible. If we do nothing, Michael said, Victoria Hayes has every legal right to claim her son. She could take Daniel. You have no legal rights over him since you're not the biological father and the birth certificate is fraudulent. But if we make the case public, Carolina continued, we could argue you're also a victim, that you didn't know anything, that you raised Daniel in good faith. A judge could grant you shared custody or at least extensive visitation rights. Sebastian stood up and walked to the window on the 12th floor overlooking the city. Below, people walked the streets with no idea of the personal tragedies unfolding in office buildings and houses, each carrying their own secret pains. I need to talk to Victoria, he finally said. I need to know what she wants. He returned to the mansion at dusk. He found Victoria and Daniel in the garden. The boy was chasing butterflies while Victoria watched him sitting on a stone bench with an expression of pure love on her face. Sebastian approached. Daniel ran to him excited. Dad, look, the boy shouted. I caught a blue butterfly, but I let it go so it wouldn't be sad. You did the right thing, son, Sebastian said, kneeling to hug the boy. Beautiful things shouldn't be locked up. Daniel nodded seriously as if he had received a great life lesson. Then he ran back to chase more butterflies. Sebastian sat next to Victoria. For a long moment, neither spoke. They just watched Daniel play with the innocence of someone who doesn't know his world is about to change forever. I have all the information, Sebastian finally said. I know exactly what happened, how they did it, who was involved, and I have evidence. Victoria looked at him with eyes full of tears that didn't fall. What do we do now? She asked with small voice. That depends on you, Sebastian responded. Legally, Daniel is your son. I have no rights over him. You can claim him, you can take him, and you'd be completely right to do so. They stole your baby. You deserve to recover those lost years. But Victoria said, reading the weight in his voice. But Daniel knows me as his father. It's the only family he's had since Lauren died. Ripping him from me would be traumatic for him, especially after everything he's already been through losing Lauren. Victoria watched Daniel run after another butterfly. Her heart was splitting in two opposite directions. One part of her wanted to take her son and run, lock herself with him somewhere and recover every lost second. But the rational part knew that would destroy Daniel. I don't want to hurt him, she finally said with broken voice. I've waited 24 years to find him. I can wait a little longer for it to be the right time to tell him. Sebastian felt immense relief mixed with guilt. What do you propose? He asked. I stay working here as his nanny, Victoria said. I spend time with him. I let him know me, trust me, love me as an important person in his life. And when it's the right time, when he's a little older and can understand, we tell him the truth. Both of us together. And what about you? Sebastian asked. What about your pain, your need to be recognized as his mother? I've lived without him for 24 years believing he was dead. Victoria responded with tears finally rolling down her cheeks. Now I know he's alive, that he's healthy, that he's happy. I can live a few more years with the secret if it means protecting his emotional well-being. Sebastian looked at her with deep admiration. This woman who had nothing was willing to sacrifice her right to be a mother publicly just to protect the son who had been stolen from her. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for loving Daniel enough to put his needs before yours. That's what true mothers do, Victoria responded. They agreed to keep the secret for now. Sebastian talked to his attorney to postpone any legal action. Instead, he would work on getting all the necessary documentation for when the time came. Victoria would sign documents giving Sebastian shared legal custody. When Daniel was of age, he could decide how he wanted to handle his relationship with both. The following months were strange and beautiful at the same time. Victoria moved permanently into the mansion. She was no longer just the nanny. She was part of the family, although only the two of them knew how literal that was. Daniel flourished with two adults who loved him unconditionally. With Sebastian, he learned about business and responsibility. With Victoria, he learned about tenderness and emotions. His psychologist was amazed at the progress. He said it was like a missing piece had fallen into place. One night, 3 months after the discovery, Victoria knocked on Sebastian's study door. He was reviewing work documents. Come in, he said, without looking up. Victoria entered with nervous expression. I need to talk to you about something, she said. Sebastian left the documents and gave her his full attention. My mom, Victoria began saying, is very sick. The doctors say she needs urgent lung surgery. It costs $20,000. I've been saving, but I only have $3,000. I don't know what to do. She looked embarrassed to ask for help. Sebastian stood up. I'll pay for the entire surgery, he said without hesitating. Victoria shook her head. I can't accept that. It's too much. Victoria, Sebastian said, softening his voice. You're my son's mother, not biologically mine, but emotionally, yes. That makes you family, and family helps each other. Besides, you're giving Daniel something invaluable. You're giving him the maternal love he lost. There's no money that can pay for that. Victoria began to cry. Sebastian approached and for the second time hugged her. Let me help you, he whispered. Please. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you. The surgery was performed a week later at the best hospital in the city. Mrs. Eleanor survived, and little by little began to recover when she was discharged. Sebastian had arranged for her to also move into the mansion. There was enough space and the old woman needed care that would be easier to provide there. When Mrs. Eleanor saw the mansion where they would live for the first time, her expression was of total disbelief. Victoria had told her everything about Daniel being her lost grandson, about the plan to keep the secret for now. The old woman cried for hours, hugging her daughter. I always knew your baby was alive, Misha, she told her with weak but firm voice. I always knew. A grandmother also feels these things. Having Mrs. Eleanor in the house changed the dynamics in unexpected and beautiful ways. Daniel instantly adored the grandmother. She told him stories from her childhood. She taught him how to make bread by hand. She sang him old songs that Victoria herself had forgotten. One afternoon, Sebastian found Daniel, Victoria, and Mrs. Eleanor in the kitchen, covered in flour, making sweet bread. They laughed together. Mrs. Eleanor was making some joke. Daniel laughed with that clean and frank laugh of happy children. Victoria looked at them both with an expression of joy mixed with melancholy. Sebastian stayed at the entrance watching the scene, and for the first time since Lauren's death, he felt his house was becoming a home again, not because of the luxury or the space, but because of the genuine love that now filled its walls. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, the three adults sat on the terrace. Mrs. Eleanor smoked with special permission from her doctors, one of the 2 weekly cigarettes they allowed her. Sebastian drank wine. Victoria herbal tea. Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Eleanor said with her raspy voice, I want to thank you for what you're doing for my daughter and my grandson. A lesser man wouldn't have had the greatness to share the boy he raised as his own. I'm not as noble as you think, Sebastian responded. Daniel isn't my son by blood, but he's my son in my heart. Giving him up would have been giving up my reason to live. This isn't generosity, it's survival. Still, the old woman insisted, other men would have fought in courts, would have tried to keep the child using their resources and power. You chose a more difficult but more loving path. They stayed silent, listening to the crickets in the garden. Finally, Sebastian spoke. You know, he said with thoughtful voice, for years I felt guilty for not seeing the signs with Lauren, for not suspecting something was wrong, for being so blind and trusting. But now I wonder if part of me always knew. If at some subconscious level I felt something didn't add up but chose to ignore it because I wanted a son so badly I didn't care how he arrived. You can't blame yourself for that, Victoria said softly. You loved your wife. You trusted her. No one expects the person you love to be capable of something so horrible. But I should have asked more, Sebastian insisted. I should have investigated when the blood types didn't match. I should have followed up on the inconsistencies in her pregnancy story. I was complicit by omission. Mijo, Mrs. Eleanor said, using that affectionate term that surprised him pleasantly. The only guilty one here is the person who organized the theft. Your wife and the doctors. You and my daughter are victims. Both of you. Stop punishing yourselves for other people's crimes. That simple but profound advice helped both begin to heal. It wasn't Sebastian's fault he had been deceived. It wasn't Victoria's fault she had been poor and vulnerable. They had both been pawns in a cruel game played by people without scruples. 6 more months passed. Life found a rhythm. Daniel turned 8. They had a party in the garden with his school classmates. Victoria baked the 3 chocolate cake that was the boy's favorite. Sebastian hired magicians and clowns, Mrs. Eleanor sat in a comfortable chair watching everything with a full smile. When Daniel blew out the candles, Victoria watched him close his eyes and make a wish. When he opened his eyes, he looked for her among the crowd of guests and smiled at her. That smile that was the same one she had imagined in her dreams for 24 years. A week after the birthday, Daniel asked a question that caught them off guard. They were having dinner, the 4 of them as they did every night. Suddenly Daniel left his fork and looked at Victoria with that seriousness he sometimes showed. Victoria, he asked, why did you never have children of your own? The silence that followed was tense. Sebastian and Mrs. Eleanor looked at Victoria, waiting to see how she responded. Victoria took a deep breath. I did have a son, Daniel, she responded with calm voice. A long time ago, but they took him from me when he was a baby. They told me he had died. It was the saddest day of my life. Daniel looked at her with those green eyes full of empathy. Do you miss him? He asked with soft voice. Every day, Victoria responded with absolute honesty. But you know what? Now I have the blessing of taking care of you. And when I'm with you, I feel like my heart that was broken repairs a little bit. Do you think your son would have been like me? Daniel asked with genuine childish curiosity. Victoria felt the tears but smiled. I think he would have been exactly like you, intelligent, kind, with a beautiful smile that lights up everything. Daniel got down from his chair and walked around the table to where Victoria was. He climbed onto her lap and hugged her. I can be your son now, he whispered in Victoria's ear. Not for real, but like in your heart. Victoria couldn't contain the tears that rolled freely down her cheeks. She hugged Daniel with all the force of 24 years of contained love. I would love that, my love, she whispered back. I would love it. When Daniel returned to his chair to finish his dinner as if nothing had happened, Sebastian and Victoria looked at each other across the table. They didn't need words. They both knew that had been a defining moment. Daniel, in his innocence, had proposed exactly what they had been trying to build. A non-traditional family united by love more than blood. After dinner, when Daniel went to his room to read before sleeping, Mrs. Eleanor spoke. Soon it will be time to tell him the complete truth. She said with wisdom, that boy is intelligent. He's starting to make connections. Better he hears the truth from your lips than discovers it by accident. You're right, Sebastian said. But how do you explain something like that to an 8-year-old boy? How do you tell him that the mother he remembers participated in stealing him from his true mother's arms? With love, Victoria responded. We tell him with a lot of love, and we assure him that no matter what, nothing will change, that we both love him, that we'll always love him, that he'll have two families instead of one. They agreed to wait until after summer vacation. Give Daniel a few more months of innocence before changing his world forever. The summer was magical. Sebastian took a full month off from work, something he had never done before. He took Daniel, Victoria, and Mrs. Eleanor to the beach. He rented a house facing the ocean. They spent days building sand castles, swimming in the waves, cooking together, playing board games on rainy nights. One afternoon, Sebastian and Victoria were walking along the beach while Daniel and Mrs. Eleanor looked for shells near the shore. You know, Victoria said, I never imagined my life could get to this, to have even partially back my son, to live in a beautiful house, to not have to worry about money for medicines or food. Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming and I'm going to wake up in my old apartment with the leaks and cold floor. It's not a dream, Sebastian said. This is real, and you deserve it, Victoria. You deserve every good part that life is giving you now. You also deserve to be happy, she responded. I've seen how you look toward the horizon sometimes, like you're waiting for something that never arrives. Don't punish yourself for what your wife did. You didn't know. It's not your fault. Sebastian stopped and looked toward the ocean. The waves broke with their eternal rhythm. Lauren and I didn't have a perfect marriage, he admitted. I loved her, but it wasn't that passionate love you see in movies. It was more like companionship, like a partnership. She came from the same world I did. We spoke the same social language. But now I wonder if I really knew her, if I ever saw beyond the facade she presented. People are complicated, Victoria said. Sometimes we do terrible things for reasons we don't even understand ourselves. Your wife desperately wanted a baby. That doesn't justify what she did. Nothing justifies stealing a child. But maybe in her mind, twisted by desperation, she convinced herself she was doing something good, that she was saving me from raising a child in poverty, that she was giving that baby a better life. Sebastian looked at her surprised. How can you be so understanding with her after what she did to you? Victoria smiled with sadness. Because being angry and bitter only hurts me. Lauren is already dead. She can't pay for what she did. She can't apologize. She can't fix anything. The only thing I can do is choose to forgive, to be able to move forward. Not for her, for me. That emotional maturity left Sebastian speechless. This woman, who had every reason in the world to be full of hate and resentment, had chosen the path of forgiveness. Not because it was easy, but because it was the only path toward healing. When they returned from vacation, September arrived. Daniel started 3rd grade. One afternoon after school, Sebastian and Victoria asked him to sit with them in the living room. Mrs. Eleanor was also present. Daniel looked at them with curiosity. Is everything okay? He asked, with slight concern in his voice. Everything's fine, my love, Victoria said, but we have something very important to tell you. Something about your history, about where you really come from. For the next hour they told him everything, with carefully chosen words appropriate for his age. They explained about the hospital, about the terrible mistake that was made, about how Victoria was his birth mom. But Sebastian was his heart dad because he had raised him. They assured him 1,000 times that nothing would change, that they both loved him, that Mrs. Eleanor was his real grandmother, that he now had more family than before, not less. Daniel listened without interrupting. His face went through many emotions: confusion, surprise, sadness, anger. Finally, when they finished talking, he stayed silent for what seemed like an eternity. So he finally said with small voice, My mom, Lauren, wasn't my real mom. She was your mom in all the important senses. Sebastian responded quickly. She loved you. She took care of you. She sang you lullabies. She read you stories. That doesn't change just because we now know Victoria gave birth to you. But she stole me, Daniel said, with tears beginning to form in his eyes. She stole me from Victoria. Yes, Sebastian admitted. She did, and it was wrong, Very wrong. But it's also complicated. She wanted a baby so much. She made a terrible decision. People sometimes do bad things when they're desperate. Daniel looked at Victoria. You're my real mom, he said, as if testing the words in his mouth. Yes, my love, Victoria responded with tears rolling down her cheeks. I'm your birth mom, but Sebastian is your dad in every sense. And we both love you more than anything in this world. Daniel processed this. Then he asked, Why didn't you tell me before? Because we wanted you to feel safe first, Sebastian explained. We wanted you to know Victoria, to trust her, to know in your heart that she loves you before telling you who she really is. Are you mad at us for lying to you? Victoria asked with trembling voice. Daniel shook his head. No. I understand why you waited, but no more secrets, right? Promise me there won't be more secrets. We promise you, Sebastian and Victoria said in unison. Daniel got up from the sofa and walked toward Victoria. He climbed onto her lap and hugged her tight. Can I call you Mom, Victoria? He asked in low voice. Victoria felt her heart explode with joy. You can call me whatever you want, my love. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. Daniel then went to Sebastian and also hugged him. You're still my dad, he told him. Nothing changes that. Nothing in the universe can change that, Sebastian responded with voice choked by emotion. The following days were of adjustment. Daniel had many questions, some difficult to answer, but they faced each one with honesty and love. Daniel's psychologist helped them navigate the process. He said Daniel was handling the revelation remarkably well considering the complexity of the situation. A month later, Daniel asked them if he could officially change his name to include the surname Hayes, along with Sterling. He wanted to be Daniel Sterling Hayes. Both surnames, both families, both stories that had formed him. Sebastian and Victoria agreed immediately. They did the legal paperwork. Sebastian officially adopted Daniel, giving him full parental rights. Victoria was recognized as biological mother. They established shared custody, although in practice everyone lived together in the mansion that had become a true home. Another year passed. Daniel turned 9. He was happy, secure, loved. He had 2 parents who adored him, a grandmother who spoiled him, a life full of opportunities he never would have had if things had been different. One afternoon, when Daniel was 17 and applying to universities, they asked him in one of his essays about an event that had changed his life. He wrote about the day he discovered the truth about his birth, about having 2 mothers, about how tragedy can transform into something beautiful, about the power of forgiveness and love. His essay was so powerful they accepted him at his first-choice university with full scholarship. When the acceptance letter arrived, the whole family celebrated. Mrs. Eleanor was already 92 years old. Her health was fragile, but her mind was clear. That night during the celebration dinner, she raised her glass of juice, since she couldn't drink alcohol, and said with weak but clear voice, I've lived a long life. I've seen a lot, good things and bad things. But what fills me with most pride is seeing this family, a family that was born from pain but chose love, that faced the truth no matter how painful, that decided to build something beautiful from the ruins. You 3 are my greatest blessing. A year later, Mrs. Eleanor died peacefully in her sleep. Daniel, who was already in his first year of university, returned home for the funeral. He cried in Victoria and Sebastian's arms. The loss hurt, but there was also gratitude. Gratitude because Mrs. Eleanor had lived long enough to see her grandson grow up, to see her daughter happy, to be part of this extraordinary family that fate had brought together. In her will, Mrs. Eleanor left a letter for each one. To Daniel, she wrote, My precious grandson, when you were born your mom lost you, but the universe has mysterious ways of fixing things. It brought you back to her when she needed it most. You grew up with the love of 2 families, with opportunities your ancestors only dreamed of. But never forget where you come from working people, from people who know what it is to suffer. Use your education and your privileges to help others, to do justice, to make sure no other mother has to go through what your mom Victoria went through. I love you more than words can express. Your grandmother who will always watch over you from the stars. To Victoria, she wrote, My daughter, my strong girl. You went through hell and came out the other side. You didn't just survive, you flourished. You found your son. You found love. You found your place in the world. I'm so proud of the woman you are, of the mother you are, of the wife you are. Always forgive, always love. And remember, your dad and I are waiting for you on the other side. But don't hurry. Live fully. Laugh a lot. Hug your family and be happy. You deserve it. I love you forever, your mom. To Sebastian, she wrote, Sebastian, when my daughter came to your house looking for work, I never imagined she would find a family. You didn't just give her back her son. You gave her back her life. You gave her love, dignity, a home. And in return, she gave you something you didn't have either. A real family built on honesty and genuine love. Thank you for seeing my daughter as what she is, a woman of incalculable value. Thank you for loving my grandson like your own son. Thank you for opening your heart and your home. Take care of them, and let them take care of you. You're a good man, Sebastian Sterling. Your mother-in-law who appreciates you more than you know. The three cried reading their letters, and they hugged knowing Mrs. Eleanor had been the matriarch who kept the family together with her wisdom and unconditional love. Daniel graduated from university with honors. He studied law with specialization in children's and family rights. His thesis was on child trafficking and adoption system reform. Eventually, he became a lawyer working for a non-profit organization that helped families who had been victims of fraudulent adoptions. In his first big case, he managed to reunite a mother with her son after 15 years of separation. The woman cried just like Victoria had cried the day she discovered Daniel was alive. And Daniel understood his purpose in life was to use his story to help others. When he was 25, Daniel met a girl at his work. Her name was Sophia. She was a social worker. She came from a humble family. She reminded him of Victoria in many ways, in her determination, in her compassion, in her ability to see the best in people even after seeing the worst. He took her to meet Sebastian and Victoria. The dinner was full of laughter and easy conversation. After Sophia left, Sebastian and Victoria exchanged looks. That's the one, Victoria said with mother's certainty. Definitely, Sebastian agreed. A year later, Daniel and Sophia got married. The wedding was bigger than Sebastian and Victoria's had been, but equally full of love. During his speech as best man and father of the groom, Sebastian stood up with glass in hand. My son, he began, and had to stop to compose himself. My son taught me that fatherhood isn't about biology. It's about being present, about loving unconditionally, about guiding without controlling. Daniel, we don't share the same blood, but we share something more important. We share a life, we share love, we share this extraordinary family we built together. Then he gave the microphone to Victoria. She stood up with tears already rolling down her cheeks. Daniel, she said with trembling voice, I carried you in my womb. I gave birth to you. But then I lost you. For 24 years I lived with an emptiness I thought would never fill. And then Sebastian appeared in my life, and he brought me to this house. And there you were, my baby, turned into a beautiful boy. The universe gave you back to me. And not only that, it gave me Sebastian. It gave me a family. It gave me a life I never dreamed possible. Today I see you turned into an extraordinary man, a man who chose to dedicate his life to helping others, to making sure no family goes through what we went through. I'm so proud of you, not just because you're my son, but because of the man you decided to be. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Daniel and Sophia had their first daughter 2 years later. They named her Mercedes Lauren, in honor of both grandmothers. The baby had Victoria and Daniel's eyes, those same eyes that had passed from generation to generation. When Victoria held her granddaughter for the first time, she felt the circle closing. From her arms, a baby had been ripped 24 years before. Now she held that baby's daughter. Life had come full circle. Sebastian watched Victoria with the baby in her arms and felt a deep peace. They had been through so much betrayal, pain, loss, but also love, healing, forgiveness. And in the end, they had built something beautiful from the ruins. Daniel looked at his parents, his wife, his daughter, and felt overwhelming gratitude. His life had begun with a terrible act of theft and injustice. But the people who loved him had chosen to transform that darkness into light. They had chosen forgiveness over revenge, love over hate, union over division. One afternoon years later, when Mercedes was 5 years old, and Daniel and Sophia were expecting their second child, the whole family was gathered in the mansion's garden. Sebastian was 70 years old now, but still strong. Victoria, 65, her hair completely white, but her eyes just as bright. Mercedes ran through the garden chasing butterflies exactly as Daniel had done at her age. Victoria watched her with a smile. You know, she told Sebastian, who was sitting next to her, sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night and have to remind myself all this is real, that it's not a dream. Sebastian took her wrinkled but still warm hand. It's real, my love. 30 years building this life together, and we're still here. We're still here, Victoria repeated. Against all odds, despite everything, we're still here. Daniel approached with Sophia. They sat with them watching Mercedes play. Dad, Mom, Daniel said. Sophia and I have been talking. We want you to know something. We've decided to create a foundation in honor of you two, the Sterling Hayes Foundation. It's going to work specifically on child trafficking cases and fraudulent adoptions. It's going to help reunite families. It's going to provide free legal support. It's going to make sure other mothers like you, Mom, don't lose their children forever. Victoria covered her mouth with her hands. New tears, tears that after so many years still flowed easily when it came to this family. Oh, Daniel, she whispered. That's perfect. Sebastian also had moist eyes. We're so proud of you, son, he said with hoarse voice. So proud. Mercedes ran toward them with a flower she had picked. Look, Grandma, she shouted, excited. It's for you. Victoria took the flower, a simple white daisy, and held it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Thank you, my love, she told the girl. It's the most beautiful flower I've ever seen. Mercedes climbed onto Victoria's lap. Sebastian put his arm around both. Daniel and Sophia joined the hug. And for one perfect moment, frozen in time, they were simply a family. Not a traditional family, not a family that had started conventionally, but a real family, united by love, by choice, by forgiveness, by all the things that really matter. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Shadows lengthened in the garden. But in that circle of embracing people there was only light. The light of love that had survived the deepest darkness. The light of hope that refused to die even in the most desperate moments. The light of forgiveness that healed wounds that seemed too deep to heal. And in that moment, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that every tear she had shed, every night she had cried herself to sleep, every day she had lived with the emptiness in her heart, all had been worth it, because it led her to this moment, to this family, to this life that was more beautiful than she ever dared to imagine. Love always finds its way back. Victoria thought, looking at the faces of the people she loved, always. No matter how long it takes, no matter how many obstacles there are, true love always finds its way back home. And she was finally home with her son, with her husband, with her granddaughter, with the family that fate had snatched from her, but that time forgiveness and unbreakable love had given back to her. It wasn't the ending she had expected when she was 18 and held her baby for the first time. It wasn't the ending she had imagined during all those years of pain, but it was a perfect ending anyway, because it was full of real love, of genuine forgiveness, of true family, and that was all that really mattered at the end of the day. Love, always love.